enjoyed the additional time off. I had the opportunity to do some work as well, but it was a lot more early, which is nice. It's nice when you don't have um, when you although I do get up early, it's nice that I don't have to start work at 8:45 and necessarily go until 3:15. Um, so, but we've got a long, that was our short stretch. We've got a long stretch ahead of us. Okay. We are now looking at going right until the end of June together. And then you will be transitioning to another half of the second half of the program, which is with Mohammed, starting in July. And I'll be taking his students on to work internships, as I'm sure you've already known. Our next long break is not till the end of summer. So we've got 2 weeks off at the end of summer. So that's the next long break that you'll have. But until then, we'll be working every day. I've got a pretty good course planned, I think. It's not fully planned, but it's a lot of it's planned up here. Now it's just getting those ideas out and testing them out myself to make sure that they make sense. And that I've done this before. Okay, so I know it makes it sound like I've never done this before. I've done this before many times. However, as with all my other courses, I like to tweak them a little bit to try to give you the best experience. Every time I teach this, I think to myself, oh, well, this course could be so much better if only I did this. If only I focused on this. And this year, I'm taking some matters into my own hands and updating a lot of the content. So hopefully I'm trying to keep it challenging, but at the same time, I'm trying to make it really, really interesting for you. So we're going to build some really cool things. So as you know, we're starting a new course today. That last course is probably, as I mentioned while we were going through it, it's one of the most difficult courses of our program, in my opinion. I haven't done the back-end component of the program, so I don't know about that part. But I think this particular course, SD110, the Introduction to JavaScript, being an introduction to programming and moving at the speed that we do is really difficult. And as I'm sure a lot of you can attest to, it's learning to program and learning to apply concepts and syntax of programming is not an easy thing. Now that we have, though, a more robust background in it, like we can do more things, and as you saw with the final project, we can actually do a lot of stuff. We're now going to take that stuff and we're going to slow down learning new things, and instead we're going to focus on a lot more on application. Now that's not to say we're not going to learn new things. I will be teaching a lot of new things, but we're really going to focus on application. So we're going to be building a lot more stuff going forward, which means shorter lectures, likely, fewer lectures, and more days of project-based learning. Because now we have the tools to really start building a lot more stuff. Which is why we should probably take a look at the course outline for the upcoming course. So you should all now be enrolled in the course IT LMS. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. All right. I find it interesting that, and this is just a comment, this isn't necessarily saying anything. Some of the other courses, I have my daily meetings every day at 2:30, right, with the other instructors, and we talk about how some of the other courses are doing their online delivery, and a lot of the other courses are insisting that all the students put their cameras on, no one's allowed to record, and that everyone has to have their mics on, but on mute as well, so that all the cameras on. Otherwise, they're considered not in attendance. I thought that was interesting. I don't know if I would. I would like some interaction, but I understand at the same time that like you may not have the best environment to have your mics on and have um, your cameras on. But okay, so here we go. Now that you guys got to read my chat with Zach, we're going to take a look at the course outline for SD120. Okay, SD120 is object-oriented JavaScript. Okay, so object-oriented JavaScript, what we'll be focusing on is actually something a little bit different. It's called object-oriented programming. Okay, we've already looked at objects, so we're going to do essentially a deep dive into objects. This course is 72 hours. So this is technically the same length as our last course, except for a little bit of information. Our last course went for 123 hours, I think. I did the calculation closer to the end. So we actually went 50 hours of overtime on that. I don't regret it. It's just a fact, right? I'm sure you all remember that writing course that we were doing. I'm gonna have to figure something out with that because I made the conscious decision to focus more on programming and to focus less on the writing. And I'm happy I did because given the struggles that we had going through our last course, and honestly, given the struggles that I have with that course every year, I just don't think 80 hours or 72 hours for that last course is adequate. So I'll be looking at updating that in the future so that this will reflect something a little bit more accurate. But I do have the plan for 72 hours for this course. I have planned out the rest of the year in terms of the calendar and the courses I need to get through and how much time I have assigned to each one. So this is what it's going to take. So we have to do this in 72 hours. And that translates to, we're going to be doing 5.5 hours a day. I don't know how crazy I am having you come back into class for another lecture at the end of the day digitally. It's a lot easier when we're working in a physical space together, but online, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we might have to change things. I was counting on us getting back in the classroom at some point, but that I don't know if we're ever going to see each other in the classroom again until you're in the other classroom. I suspect this is going to go on longer than the summer. For those of you who didn't catch my message online, this has been changed from working at home until April 16th until working at home indefinitely. So we're going to be doing this for a while longer. I would suspect at least until June, if not longer than that. That's just a guess. Okay. This course, though, however, starts today. And we're going until April 23rd. If you look at your calendar, April 23rd is, we are here, April 6th. We're going to April 23rd, which is right here. So it's 2 full weeks and 4 days, okay? This Friday, April 10th, for those of you who are unaware, is a day off, another day off. We come back to school on a short week, which is pretty nice. So you get 4 days, and then it's Good Friday. As always, my email address, format, classroom, yeah. Okay, so what are we going to be doing? You can look at the general learning outcomes up here, but I'm more interested in this stuff here. Basically, for the first few classes, today we're going to be looking at objects. And so we've already looked at objects. I'm doing a review on objects because we spent, I think, one class looking at objects. We used objects a little bit. We used hopefully some of us used them on one assignment, but that was it. Really, you could have gotten by from then until now without touching objects again and completely forgetting all the stuff that we talked about. So we're going to review that. So it's going to be reviewed today. It's an easy day to ease into stuff, okay? But I've got to drop a couple bombs on you today with respect to objects, not even objects, just stuff that we haven't talked about yet. And normally I do it in the last course, but I decided to move it over to here because I think it makes more sense. So that's what we'll be doing today. I've got a really good exercise. The week of exercises is really good. Be prepared for a lot of work, not necessarily hard work, but I feel like we're going to be building more interesting things. And when we build more interesting things, they tend to be a little bit more work. So just be prepared. Introduction to OOP. So I'm going to start our introduction into object-oriented programming. So object-oriented programming tomorrow. And we'll be talking about that for a couple days. On Thursday, it's going to be a practice project day. So no lecture, there'll be short lecture, just review of our exercise, and then answering questions, review, essentially no new content, right? And then I've got a nice project for you. That will lead into Monday. Monday, I'll be introducing a brand new topic called inheritance. And then on that night, so Monday day after our lecture, instead of an exercise, I'll be giving you an assignment. So it'll be a one-day assignment. So you'll take it home that night, you'll hand it in the next day. Hopefully with the practice project the day before, you'll be well practiced up and ready to deliver. We'll be doing a couple more days of inheritance, jumping into some new ES6 syntax, another practice project, an in-class assignment. We'll be implementing some third-party libraries, which will be really cool, I think. That's something I've never done before. This is brand new stuff. Third-party libraries will be adding some interesting stuff to an existing website. So we're still going to be focusing on websites and web applications. Okay. Another practice project. So as you can see, there's a lot. We go practice project, in-class assignment. This is essentially more practice project. The class 10 and 11 is more practice project. And then class 12 and class 13 is going to be our final project. So it goes pretty quick. We've only got 2 assignments in this one. These are full day classes, and the breakdown looks like this. Our assignments are 40%, 50% for assignment 1, 25% for assignment 2, and 60% for our final project. That's kind of the breakdown. We are not building a classic arcade game, Frogger. That is a lie. I'm gonna have to change. I neglected to change that. I'll have to update that. Are there any questions? Syntactic sugar. BioClue. Syntactic sugar. I'm curious to see what you found for syntactic sugar. What is syntactic sugar in programming languages? It's a term. Okay, so this should be good. It's I don't know if it's a real term. It's a term that describes a feature in a language that lets you do something more easily with less typing involved. So as we're going to see in JavaScript, I am going to introduce you. Oh yeah, it's not in the dictionary. It's in the programmer's dictionary. Okay, there's a lot of words that you're going to find that programmers have made up, but they're widely accepted in the programming community. Okay, and so syntactic sugar. You will see, I'm going to teach you the hard and long way of doing stuff with JavaScript. And then 2 days later, I'm going to show you this super easy way of doing the same thing And you're going to be like, oh, well, that's really easy. Why didn't we just learn that? And the thing is, it unfortunately, learning it the easy way really takes a lot away from the learning. So um, that easy way, the easy syntax, it's called syntactic sugar. It actually didn't used to exist, and that's usually how languages work. They have all, as they grow up, as new versions of a language come out, they make updates, right? Like HTML is, we're at HTML5, we're at CSS3, and they've made updates to essentially make it easier to type, in addition to all the other stuff that they're adding, right? Those are part of when a language gets a version update. That's usually the type of stuff that gets updated, or some of the stuff. Great question. Any other questions? Nothing? Okay. Okay. Quiet bunch today. Everyone's sleeping. Let's move this down here. But can you see which screen am I sharing? The whole thing. Yeah, okay. Because it usually shows a big like, yeah. 1, 2. Are you can see both screens? Can you see both screens? And yeah, so on the left, it should be my browser. On the right, it should be the Discord, right? I have, that's, and my browser, but you can't see my bottom screen, right? Okay, just the two. Okay, good. That screen at the top is one screen. Okay, desktop one. Okay, good. Because usually it shows like a big green border around what I'm sharing, but it's not. So maybe they messed something up with their update. Excellent. Okay. So let's chat. So today we are going to look at, okay, we're going to investigate some more objects. So let's do this. And Be doing that after. And we'll do a new, I'll fix the font size right away. So we'll move sample here on the left, and then this to be on the right. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the stuff on the right, that's for me. You can take a look if you want. Stuff on the left is what we're going to be doing right now. Okay, in case you didn't know, you can split up your code like this. You can make a bunch of different boards. You can do left and right, top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. You can do 4. You have to have a big enough screen to be able to support that. At this point in time, you probably don't see the need to do that, given the fact that we're really mostly only working in one code base at a time. Okay, so let's talk about objects. So we talked about objects a little bit last course, but we're going to dive in quite a bit deeper today. But we're going to start with a pretty good review. So the big question is, what is an object? like really, and we saw objects essentially being like one of these things. It's kind of like an awesome array, right? An awesome array where we can give the values a name, right? So remember, in an array, we have a set of values, right? And these values, they don't have names, they just have locations, right? And remember, in an array, they're called elements, okay? So these are called elements in an array. They are just values. They have no names. We access them by their index. So if you remember, if you can remember correctly, going back, this is index 0. This would be index 3, right? Each index has a different number. However, with objects, they're a little bit different because objects don't just have values. Objects have keys. Right? Objects are essentially what we call a key value pair. But they are a collection. So a collection often refers to anything that can hold multiple items. Okay, that's not like a precise term in JavaScript, but you will again see that be referred to very often in many programming languages. Collections are things that hold many items. So objects look like they're declared like this. They have key value pairs. Okay. The key is usually a string or some sort of string-like word. Okay, we'll take a little, again, we'll go a little bit more deeply into what these can be and what these can be shortly, just as a review. But this is what we know about an object so far. But in reality, this is going to be really a really hard thing to wrap your head around. Everything in JavaScript just about is an object. Functions are objects. Arrays are objects. Even our strings are objects. Our integers are objects. In a sense, they're treated, there's essentially two different types of each one of those. So we've actually been working deeply with objects this whole time, and that's not uncommon in programming languages. In a lot of programming languages, everything is an object. In Ruby, literally everything is an object. And we'll start to, as we go through this course, I'll start to highlight what exactly that means. For now, let's just go with the concept that almost everything in JavaScript is an object. And as we start to slowly uncover what exactly an object is and what that means, hopefully you'll be like, oh, interesting. Okay, that, like we'll start to really identify what that is. So if you shouldn't get that. You shouldn't get what that means right now. But over time, in the next couple of days, you'll start to see that. Okay. For today, what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be looking at this object. Okay. So if you don't remember, this is an object literal declaration. Okay, and assignment. Okay, I am literally declaring an object. Okay, so this is called an object literal. Again, this is all review. Okay, take a look at how I have my spacing. Okay, how I break it down at from line to line. Take a look at my syntax with the comma at the end. Okay. These keys, so on the left here, we have keys. On the right here, we have values. These are oftentimes, depending on how you're looking at the object. Okay, so there's a couple different lenses we can look at an object through. We can look at an object essentially as just a collection of keys and values, okay? And that is probably most commonly the lens we would look at when we're using objects for settings. Let's see if we could find here some settings. Here we go. And we've already looked at this. Okay, these are our settings for VS Code. Okay, you can see it's an object. It has this object kind of curly brace at the top and the bottom, and it's full of keys and values. Keys and values. Why do these keys have dots in them? Well, that was a decision that VS Code made to break down their keys. We can put dots around keys too, as long as they have quotes around them. And then the values here. So the lens we would look at this is simply key values. This object itself doesn't carry a lot of meaning behind it, meaning that we'll soon be looking at as we're moving into more object-oriented programming. Okay, sometimes we want our objects to convey meaning, just like our variable names can convey meaning. Now, these do convey meaning. Editor.rulers. Editor.rulers is this ruler thing over here, right there. And if I add another number to this array here, like 120, let's go 60. I save that. I get another ruler. Okay, so that has meaning, but not meaning in the same sense of the word as when I'm talking about an object conveying meaning. So this lens that I'm looking through, key values, that's it. Okay, excellent for configuration. You'll see it used a lot. Take a look at the top here. It's a .json file that is JavaScript object notation. Okay. So key value pairs, no problem. It's a collection of stuff, right? We can do that. And again, as I mentioned before, we can wrap these in a string, or we don't need to. That's really up to us and what we need to do or want to do. If we want to put a dot, or we want to put a dash, we want to put, and we want to start this with a number, or we want to put a space, okay, we have to put quotes or double quotes. Quotes, double quotes. I don't know if backticks work here. Let me take a look. They don't. So backticks are not always something we can replace with a string, but usually they are. Okay. Remember, we have a dangling comma at the end, a hanging comma. So no matter how many we have to have a comma in between every line, but our last one, okay, is optional. This will not error. This is fine. However, it's convention to include one. That way it's easier to do what I just did, which is take a line, copy it, and paste. We cannot have more than one key, unfortunately, because I'm not too sure exactly what would happen, but I think declaring the same key more than once will end up overriding the value of that key. So we can test it out pretty easily by console.logging that. And yes, so it overrode the first key that was declared, and it printed out the value of the second one. Okay, so it's not that there's two keys, it's that the value of the second key that is the same key, is just updated. It's updating the value of it. Okay, now that's one lens of looking at it in a key value, in a very collection minded way, right? It's just a collection of key value pairs. However, there's another way of looking at it, and that is through the perspective, through the lens of an actual object, an object that we're also a little familiar with, and that is an object that has properties and methods. Okay, so I'm making a new person object here. And we'll add a function, a method, eat. Okay, so here, this is again a different lens. It's the exact same thing syntactically, but it kind of carries a little bit of a different meaning, right? This isn't just a collection of key value pairs. It is, but that's not really what I'm trying to convey. And that's not really what I mean by it, right? I want someone to look at this and instead of seeing a set of configurations, I want someone to look at this and say, oh, that's a person. Okay, this object represents a person. And yes, technically lines 2, 3, 4, 5 are key value pairs. Eat, function, right? Eat is the key, function is the value. Okay, but these also have other names, right? And if you can remember, these are called properties. Okay, name, age, and height, they're called properties. And typically, anything that has a function associated to it with the key, we call a method. So depending on the reading you find, some people might say this has 4 properties, name, age, height, and eat. And one of those properties is a method. I prefer to use the distinction, and I've read lots of books and I've seen them both ways. I prefer to use the distinction. These 3 are 3 properties, 1 method. So that is how I will be referring to these. So properties, methods. Essentially, if it's not a method, it's a property. Okay, a property typically only has a value. It is not even that. It is not a function. A property is not a function. A method, any method is a function on an object itself. And yes, same thing, key value pairs, okay? But just the way that we're looking, the way that we're expressing this object is a little bit different, okay? So those are really the 2 lenses that we would look at an object. Any questions on that? Won't be on a quiz. That's just FYI. Okay. Let's take a look at some, we already looked at a little bit at declaring objects, but we'll look at it a little bit more. Okay, so this is our object literal notation in addition to this. So this is object literal. We also have object constructor notation, and we'll be using this a lot more in the next few days. And that is essentially my object 2 equals my new object. Okay. And now we have an empty object here. which I can console log, and you'll see that it's just an empty object. It prints it out as an object literal. There you go. Okay. Let me just check my activity monitor here. I'm feeling pretty sluggish right now. I just want to check my RAM. Can certainly go for some more RAM right about now. Okay, so we have an empty object. Now, if we wanted to add properties or functions to this, we add it to the object, what we call, the namespace. We call this the namespace, okay, where we have the object, and then we put the dot, and then we can make up our own key if we want, because here it has nothing. There are no properties that exist, so we can just make them up as we go. So we can call this first one full name. And again, the same restrictions apply when we're using this dot, the dot and then the key, as when we're declaring an object literal. We can't put dashes. Okay. We can put underscores. We can't put spaces, right? As we know this already, we should know this already. We've covered this. Okay, this is review. Full name and then some string. Okay, and we just assign any value to it. Okay, that's one of the ways we can do it. We can also add, so we can add or update. So a full name does not exist. It will create it and it will assign the value. If full name does exist, it will just update the value. Okay. If full name does not exist and we attempt to access full name before, it will be undefined. So if ever we wanted to check to see if it already has a key on it, we can just try to access that key. And if not, and it can return undefined if it does not exist. There's another way to do it. I think it's called exists or something. Again, in programming, there's a million ways to do everything. So there's another way we can do this, because technically full name could exist with a value of undefined, right? I can also do that. That's allowed. And then suddenly this won't work the way I expected it anymore. Okay, because now name does exist. It's just an undefined value, which is a little bit different than not being defined at all. So there's another way to check that out, but that's one way, probably one of the main ways you're going to use. In addition, we don't need to use the dot syntax, right? This is the dot syntax. We can use the, and again, we can use the bracket notation. Okay, this will get the value that I put in for full name. Okay, so then I'll print it out. Some string. There is a significant benefit of using, so you want to talk about syntactic sugar. This is essentially syntactic sugar for this. This is a much longer way of printing out our stuff, of getting our stuff. However, this is a much more powerful way. Okay. Okay, so obviously I can't do this. That I can't do. This is suggesting that there's some variable full name that I'm going to use. So the bare word, the idea of a bare word. I mean, like, I would not, maybe, kinda, this, maybe a little bit, yeah, kinda. In comparison to this, yes, I guess so. Except, yeah. Because really, under the hood, they're both the same thing, right? They're both. This is just a much more explicit way of doing this, and a much more heavy. Like, it's a lot more work for us as developers, but under the hood, you're still just getting a plain object in JavaScript, and this object and this object are treated exactly the same. So yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I don't know if a lot of developers would necessarily refer to the dot notation or this object literal notation as technically syntactic sugar, but just to give you a sense of today of what syntactic sugar is, that's kind of like what I mean. I haven't talked in a long time for like a week, so it's going to be a rough day for me. Okay. So this doesn't work, right? Well, it works, assuming we have some sort of variable called full name that has some sort of value inside the string, right? If this was 5, what it would be looking for would be some object with the key, some property with the key 5, right? It's not looking for the property full name. If we want it to look for the property full name, it has to be in strings. Now, the benefit of doing it like this is obviously when we have some keys that have spaces in them, this is how we have to access them, is like this. So you saw when we were looking at the settings for VS Code, a lot of the settings had dots in them. That means VS Code needs to use bracket syntax when it's decoding those settings, because it needs to grab those dots. So they're using bracket syntax on the other end to pull that stuff out. Okay. They can't use dot syntax because the dot does not work in there. Okay. This and this are not the same. This is suggesting that full is another object, like this, that has a value name inside it. Okay, that's what this is suggesting. Sorry, that's a capital N. Okay, whereas this is accessing something like this. Okay. So, I'm assuming this is object 2. Now, the declaration of an object and using, so we can use bracket notation, regardless of whether or not we're using object constructor notation for declaring or object literal notation for declaring. It doesn't matter. Like, I can just change this to my object, or person, I guess. Okay, and I'm gonna get rid of that. That doesn't matter. Okay, how we declare it doesn't matter. But the way that we're accessing these things matter tremendously, okay, in this bracket notation. So full dot name or full dot name are very different. Okay. So one of the benefits, again, of using bracket notation is we can use strings inside, which is awesome. The other major benefit of bracket notation is we can put a variable in here. So we can some variable, some var. So we can declare a variable. Okay. And then we can use that variable to get. So this will look at for person dot anything essentially, right? So if I said person some var is essentially going to get or attempt to get the value of the property person dot anything. That's essentially what this is doing, because the value inside of some var is the string anything. Now, when we were doing our letters, our strings, the assignment where I asked you to count the letters, right? We would have done something like, we would have had a string, right? Yeah, anything, right? And I said in my exercise, in my solution, I would break down each letter of this string using split. And I would take that letter and I would essentially put it in here and create a count out of it. And I would do that by just making, you need to use the bracket notation for that because it's a variable. I would set it to a variable and then I would just put it in like this using bracket notation. Okay, that's a really important thing to understand, and a huge, huge benefit of bracket notation. Okay, you're going to have to do that again. Okay. A little bit of vocabulary as well I want to touch on. We already clarified properties and methods. I want to talk about getting and setting. So getting is exactly what it sounds. You're getting a value out of something, and that's typically, that looks like this, right? I'm getting the value from name. This is what we call getting. I'm getting. Whereas here, I'm setting. Okay, so getting, setting. Assigning, essentially. Setting is essentially assigning, and this is essentially retrieving. Okay. Okay. Now we've got some really interesting stuff to talk about. Any questions on our recap of objects? We're going to play a lot with objects in the next couple days, in the next couple weeks. So you'll get used to a lot of this stuff. We're really, really just going to be focusing on a lot of objects. We'll continue. Before, when you did, we'll continue with the other stuff. Yes. Yeah. No. So the question is right here. If I console log this, line 15, will it print out the string anything? No. What is the value of person.anything? What is the value of that? Undefined. Correct. So it will print out undefined because that's essentially what it's doing. Right? This, right? When I put a string in here, it is now looking for the property on person with the key anything. It's just that I'm putting that key in a variable and then using that variable here instead. Okay, very important distinction. Okay, it is not like this is looking for the key anything on person. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. I didn't declare var, but it still worked. Now's a great time to talk about that. Now's a great time to talk about that because we're really going to be into that um, in that part of JavaScript anyways. Okay. So let's well let me circle back to this. Okay. So Hans Vander is saying, I didn't put anything in front of this. I didn't put let, I didn't put const, I didn't put var, but everything still worked. Why? I'll show you why right away. Okay. Generic. No. Global it's called. It doesn't work as well in Node, but it works really well in the browser. So I'll show you in the browser. We'll have to just forget about Node for a little bit. So I won't be able to show you in here. I'll run it in the browser and you'll see. Okay, so we're going to talk about this. Oh, well, one of the things actually before I mentioned, hey, guess what? You've been using objects this whole time, string, array, document. What I mean by that, and one of the things that I hope you've seen so far is that, hey, you've been using objects this whole time. We have been using this dot syntax, document dot get element by ID, right? A method on the document object. Well, how do we create a document object? How do we create an array object? So we had our arrays, right? And we have a function, a method for each on our array. Oh, actually, there's a couple other things I want to touch on before we move on. I'll finish this though. Right? So we have an array object, and this is a method on that array object. So again, object. How are these objects? Well, let's not worry about that for now. Let's just identify that, hey, we've been working with objects this whole time. This idea of arrays having methods or arrays having properties, right? This is not a method. We know it's not a method because doesn't have the brackets on it, the parentheses, right? We use the parentheses to call a function, right? Parentheses. And when they don't, we're just getting a value. So this array has both properties and methods on it. Document has both properties and methods on it. That's pretty cool. And strings, right? Even strings. We can split them, right? Even strings are objects, and strings also have a length. And we're going to see how we can begin to create these special types of objects that are different than these very generic types of objects that we've been creating so far, like our const person object, right? Which I would have to say person dot blah. And you might think, oh, in JavaScript, maybe they have a document object, and then it has the a function on it, which could be totally reasonable. Get element by ID, right? Totally reasonable. That could in fact exist, and it might have a length, and it might have all these other things on it, right? But this is not really how they do it, and we'll dig into that a little bit more. One of the other things I want to talk about, sorry, before we head on over to talking about this, is iterating through an object. Okay, so objects can have keys. Objects have values as well. So we can get, and we've already looked at this as just review. I'm just bringing this up again. Okay, so we've got two properties, sorry, a property and a function, but essentially two keys and two values. We can get the keys of an object using object.keys and passing it the object. This returns an array of keys as strings. Okay, which then we can iterate over and do whatever we want with those. Okay, we can also get the values. Okay, and this will return the actual values. So in this case, a string, John, and in this case, a function, which we could run if we wanted to. We can invoke it if we wanted to. Okay, but it's an array of things, and so we can, this array of things has a length. It has individual elements. We can access them. So those are both ways that we can use to loop over things of objects, or like if I want to ask you if you were trying to figure something out about the object, you might consider these. We can also loop over the object using the for in loop. Just a reminder. For, so this is different than the for of loop. But this will essentially just give you the keys. Key of person, not of, in. Okay. I think you can also do key, comma, val. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you can also get the key and the value. I believe you can do this. I have to double check. You can for sure do this. But this is a way that we can loop through the object and we get all the keys. Now with the keys, we can then actually use bracket notation to print out to get the value, right? This gets the value for you because key is going to be name. And then key is going to be say hi, right? So we can also get the values in this way. Looping through an object, values of an object, keys of an object. All review. Go back to your object day that we did like 2-3 weeks ago, if you're looking for more examples. Okay, all right, let's talk about this. Now, this is really interesting. Okay, this is always a fun tongue twister day. So far we have declared our person object like this, and we have used name, and we said name is John, and then I gave it a little function here. Say hi. I probably could have just not deleted my stuff from before. And we're going to say console.log. Person.name says hi. And then I wanted to put this out. I can say person.say hi. We'll run that function. We'll do this. It'll say John says hi. He says person is referring to this person variable. Okay, and they're saying hi. Okay, that's great. But what if, for example, I wanted to create an array of people? Maybe like a class full of people. And all of you could say hi. Would I do something like this? That syntax does not look very good. I don't know how that would work. Okay. Now I'm very curious about this actually. Which person one? Does this actually declare? Sorry, I'm on a little bit of a side. Does this actually declare a variable, person one? Wow. Okay. Well, that is definitely not how you would do it, though. This actually created the variable, even though I declared it inside of an array. crazy JavaScript, okay? Right, we can create an array of objects. This is essentially what we're looking at here. So we're looking at, in this lines 10 to 23, we're looking at an array of objects, one object, two objects. The problem is here, they don't have variable names, nor should they, right? They're elements inside of an array. And so when we're trying to refer back to that object, well, it doesn't have, it's not in a variable anymore. And I guess we can kind of say people, right? The people array, the 0th object, that should work. So then I can say people 0 say hi. Okay, let's see how this works. And John says hi. And over here, instead of John, let's say Spencer. Say that. And we'll try it on the second one where I didn't give it anything. And error, right? Name is not defined. I can't just say name says hi, right? So obviously this works. This clearly doesn't work because it can't see name. Okay, it's not smart enough to pick that up. It's looking for some sort of variable inside of itself called name, or maybe something that was passed in as a parameter. But this is really terrible. Like this is really, really bad. This is now saying that we can't reorganize this ever, right? This always has to be the 0th element, always, in order for this to work. We can't do sorting. We can't do anything. So we're stuck. So not very ideal. So often what you'll see is this. Okay. Now, this keyword, this is a keyword in JavaScript. Okay. The problem, the benefit, okay, we'll talk about the problems and the benefits and some of this stuff. Okay. The benefit of this is that we don't have to be specific. Okay, one, we don't have to put objects inside of variables and then refer to that variable. We don't have to do that anymore. We will continue to do that because we need some way of storing this object and using it. Right? If I just did this, we're kind of screwed because this is not very useful. I can't access this object anymore. Immediately, it's useless. But we don't have to refer to person inside. A lot of the times, yeah, you're probably looking at this and saying, oh, okay, cool. So when we're inside of the object, this refers to the object itself. And it kind of does, kind of. Okay, we're going to look a little bit more at that in 1 second. So this now, this new syntax now works. So I've replaced the reference of the object with the keyword this. And now we will get Spencer says hi, because people one, this. This is referring to this object. So this dot name is Spencer. So we'll print that out. Oh, and yeah, I have a little syntax error in here, I forgot. Okay. And we don't need that either. All right. Pretty awesome, right? I wish that was the whole thing, though. Okay, so the benefit, obviously you can see a huge benefit. right? So now it doesn't matter where we move around this object. I can now put it inside of a new variable called computer, which doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that, right? But now I can say computer.say, or I could say computer.say hi. And this is now still referring just to this object. It doesn't matter what I call it anymore. Okay. I don't have to change this to computer.name. And it'll just keep working. And John says hi. No problem. That's super awesome. Hey, super beneficial. There is a little bit of a problem here, though. I'm just going to delete all this stuff here. And the problem is that this is dynamic. And I mean, it's dynamically changing. Okay, I'm going to show you something and then we're going to take a break. This is dynamically changing. The keyword, this, always changing, depending on how we are using the object. Okay, so it's not about where it's located necessarily. It's a combination, but it's a combination of where it's located and how we're using it. And I'll show you. Okay, so the first rule for this is the object to the left of the dot or bracket. When we are getting or setting a value. For example, computer dot say hi. I would say, what, looking at line 15, what is to the left of the dot? And you would say, well, John, the dot is right here, right? So we're computer dot say hi. What is the object on the left of the dot? And you'd say computer. Therefore, this is computer. Now, it is not the string computer, it is the object computer. So if you think about it, we can essentially say this, computer.name, right? That's essentially what's happening under the hood that we can't see. So when we're talking about this, it's saying, what is to the left of the dot? To the left of the dot is computer, the object computer. So this refers to the computer object. And now we're saying computer.name, and computer.name is John. So John says hi. Okay. And you're like, okay, well, that's fine. If we went back over here, I'll undo this and then I'll redo it. We'll just take a look at our example here. Our array example. So we have a people array with one thing in it. Okay, let's actually go further back. Put John back in there. There we go. Okay, people. So we have people, comma 1, say hi. Inside of there, we have this. What is to the left of the dot? To the left of the dot is people at index 1, which is this object here. So this refers to this object. Okay, and for 90%, 95% of all instances, you can pretty much treat this as the object where it's found. But let me show you something else to kind of mess with you a little bit. Not to mess with you, to really highlight this, okay? Okay, so as we know, and so a lot of people still have a hard time with this, so I'll take a quick second to pause, take a look at line 17. What is line 17 doing? First of all, ask yourself this, okay? It's not doing very much. It's doing something really simple, but sometimes people have a hard time wrapping their head around this. Okay, so I'm just gonna pause here. You figure it out. Line 17 is assigning the function, the value of say hi to test. So test is essentially a function now, right? It is this, it has the value of this function, okay? Test has the value of that function inside of it. So now I can say parentheses, test parentheses, and I can call this function. Okay, that's what's happening here. Okay, because I didn't put parentheses on it, I'm not invoking it, instead I'm passing it, much like the same way we pass our functions to event listeners. Okay, this is exactly the same thing. I'm not invoking it, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. Okay, I'm not invoking it, I'm just getting the value. So now I have value here, test. So test can be invoked. Now here's the really interesting part. The really interesting part is this. What is the value of this? Well, we said is the object to the left of the dot or bracket when we are getting or setting a value. What is to the left of the dot on line 20? Well, there is no dot. Okay. So let's run this and find out. Saria thinks it's going to be undefined. That's a pretty good guess. Undefined says hi, because the value to the left of the dot, there is no dot. Okay, there actually is. And this works a lot better on your browser. In your browser, it's window. Okay, the item to the left of the dot, the invisible item to the left of the dot is window in your browser. In Node, it's global, I believe. Yeah, global. Okay, but really, it's undefined. The key is this dot name does not exist on either of them, on either global or on, if this was window, if this was the browser and it was window, okay, it wouldn't exist there anyway. Window.name does not exist. It is undefined. So as you can see, the point of this is to demonstrate that this is not always what you think it is. It doesn't only depend on where it's declared. It also is dependent on how it's being used. So that is a little bit of a danger with this. Now, you don't really need to worry about that too much. If people are doing dumb stuff like this with your code, well, you know what? They kind of deserve to get errors. What if you have a global variable name? Will this grab it? Yes. Yes, it will. So if you had a global, now I can't remember global dot, I don't remember in in Node if it's actually capital G global, or let's just take a quick look here. Global object node. The global object. I don't want some global objects. I want the global object. What is the global object? What is this object? Module.exports. Okay, that's way too complicated. Let's just take this over to our browser. One of the hard parts of working in Node. If we go to our browser and we say window.name equals high class, okay, and we bring this over there, it will grab window.name because window is the global object. So it's actually window.test here, which we can't see, but you'll have to trust me. Like const name. No, const name is not a global object. No. That is not the same. We can run this and I'll show you. Still undefined. Okay, if I take this to the browser, it'll be the same. But something that we haven't looked at yet is window. And we won't really look at it, but it's important to kind of see this. Okay. And it says high class says high. So it actually picked up window.name because window is actually the global object. It is the highest level object that exists in JavaScript in the browser. And so this test is actually being, when I'm calling it like this, it's actually calling window.test, believe it or not. Okay, we're going to explore that a lot more after break because I've got a couple other things to show you. We're going to continue to talk about this and we're going to keep going until I figure it out. Any other questions so far? I mean, you might have like a lot, but any other right now? No. In fact, I would recommend using this as often as possible. This is really beneficial. I teach, you will see this being used a lot. Yes, there are weird side effects of this, of the keyword this, but a lot of it comes down to knowing, not necessarily knowing how to declare it, but it's really like knowing how to use it. Like I said, if someone's doing this, then they probably deserve to get undefined, right? They shouldn't be doing this unless there's some good reason why. So it's not idiot proof. Like programming is not idiot proof. You have to know how to use the thing that you built. So just be conscious of that. It's just really important that since we're going to be using this, it's really important that we understand what this really is. A lot of people probably would go into such depths, but I really feel like if you ever ran into a problem trying to debug this, because you accidentally did something like this because you didn't know, oh man, then you'd have to spend a whole day learning about this on your own just to debug your simple problem because you would have no idea. So it's better to really have a good understanding of these things and the side effects and what to expect. That way, when you do run into a problem, you can at least have an idea of where to look. Okay. Any other questions? We'll come back. We're going to go take a break. I need some more coffee, some more water, some cough drops. All right. I will briefly stop the share. And 5. We're almost done. Our lecture for today, it's mainly going to be, the rest of it is mainly going to be talking about this, okay? And for the most part, this, again, like I mentioned, going into break, this really in-depth um, knowledge about this is not really going to come up or be required very often. For the most part, as long as you have a pretty vague idea of what this is, you're going to be fine. But again, if you run into bugs, and as a programmer, you know that you will, having a more deep understanding of the value of this is going to really help with your debugging. Okay, so this understanding the values of the changing values of this is going to be pretty important in your debugging, but I would never ask you to do an assignment and demonstrate the 17 different values of this and explain and write a paper about it. Okay, so I would never ask that. As you know, so as I'm sure you can gather so far, I ask you to build things. I don't ask you specific questions usually about a topic. Okay, so we left off going to the break, and I talked about window. Now, window, again, it doesn't really have anything to do with this in particular. Window is the global object in the browser. Okay, window is the global object in the browser. Let me share my screen again. Okay, let's bring up the chat. I feel like a streamer because like no one can talk to me and I'm just talking, and then the questions just pop up in my stream. If you guys want to do donations, that's fine too. I can put up a little thing like top donator and play like weird music in the background, if that would make it more exciting, and get like, I don't know, would that work? $10? Yeah. Maybe I'll just start doing this on Twitch and anyone can join. Okay, so window is the global object of the browser. Okay, window does not exist on Node, but you don't really have to worry about that because we're technically not using Node, right? We're technically learning programming from the web, from a web perspective, from the browser. Okay, so window is that global object. So Hansmander, going back to what you asked, when I declare, and this is really interesting, when I declare a variable without const let or var in front of it, just like this, just name equals, okay? And you can do this in JavaScript, unfortunately. This variable, let me bring this over here and just say name equals high class. This variable now exists on the global window object as a property, because window is an object. Property means we can hit dot and we can get the value of it, and now it exists. That is what happens when you don't put const, let, or var in front of your variables, which is why it works, right? Totally works, no problem. It is the definition, the absolute definition of a global variable. It exists everywhere on window, okay? Yeah, which is also where, believe it or not, our functions exist. So when I'm invoking a function, and we talk about, oh, yeah, what's to the left of this dot, this invisible dot that doesn't exist? Well, it's window. Okay. So again, when we're trying to decipher the value of this inside of a function, we always need to look at how this function or this method or whatever, this thing is being called, not how it's being declared. So it has nothing to do with the declaration. It has to do with the invocation. How is it being called? If we put parentheses on it here, okay, it's being called here, invoked here. What is to the left of the dot? Computer. This is computer. But down here, if I take these off, it is being taken and assigned to test, and it's being invoked down here. We say, what's to the left of the dot here on line 20? Well, there is nothing. So technically, it's the global object, in which case it's window. And then we would look at window, pretend this didn't exist, and we'd say, is there something called, does window.name exist? And the answer is no, it does not exist. So it's undefined, and we get undefined says hi. Okay, we'll run that again. And this is a window.test. Where is that? Yeah, sorry. Window, again, doesn't exist in Node. It's a browser thing. It's added by the browser. There we go, undefined says hi. Which means that we can have this inside any function we want. My func console log this. It's great. Okay. And we'll put a space there. We'll save. Now, if I were to invoke this, what would I get? What would be printed out to the console if I were to run this block of code right here? No. What is to the left of this dot? And this invisible dot on line 24, which we can't see. Window.myfunc. And what is this? So this is the value of whatever's to the left here. Yeah, window. So if I took this over here and I brought it to my browser, because the browser is more interesting for this stuff sometimes, and I drop it in there and I run this, it gives me object window is great. So the value of this inside of my func is object window. Pretty cool, huh? Right? Because what, again, my func. What is to the left of this invisible dot where my cursor is, right? There's an invisible dot here. And if I were to type in window.myfunc, same thing. This works too. These functions here, they're declared. They exist on a window. They exist on the window object. Window dot. And if I look at all the different properties and all the different properties and all the different methods, we'll see my func is in there. Where is it? LMN M C. There it is, my func, right there. Okay, so it's in there. And I call it, and again, the big question is, what is to the left of the dot? Window is to the left of the dot. Therefore, this object, the value of this is the object window inside of this function. No, no. Okay, so my point of this is not, hey, look, Windows is global object. Window, you pretty much don't want to know about it. It's just like we're never really going to, you could use it, but we don't want to ever store objects in there. We typically don't want to store function, like the functions just get stored in there. That's just a byproduct. We don't really want globals are generally bad. Okay. This is kind of like a byproduct of the web being really old and we just can't change things, which is why it works really great in browsers, because browsers have inherently old stuff lying around that we probably shouldn't be using, like old tools that we probably shouldn't be using. But they can't get rid of it because there are some websites out there that did use them, and the browsers still have to respect that, that there may be a million websites out there using Window. And so, which is why Node does it so much better, right? Node came out in like 2010. So they have object global. They have a global object, but it's done in a different way. You can't really access this global object. It's not global.myfunc. I don't think. I'd be very surprised. I think this will just break on me. Yeah. Global.myfunc is not a function. So they've kind of fixed that stuff in Node because Node doesn't have the same requirements that a browser does. So the point of all this is not, hey, look, here's Window. Let's start using Window. The point of all this is just to like show you about this weird global object and how this is really dynamic. How it doesn't matter how it's declared, but instead how it's invoked. Okay, the value of this is based on how it's invoked. So this is really cool here. Watch this. Okay. So this dot name. So again, you look at this and you're like, oh, well, this is Window because it's in a function. And this function does not belong inside an object. What the object that it belongs to is Window. Therefore, this is Window. And you might see that and say that might be the relation that you make in your head, but the real answer is, well, we actually don't know what this is because we don't see it. It's changing. It depends on how we use it. So if I were to do this, so I'm adding a new method to this object up here. And it's myfunc, no parentheses. So I'm assigning the value. So I'm assigning this stuff to a new method. Now I can call computer new method and invoke it. So I'm going to run this function now, but now let's look at how it's invoked. What is to the left of the dot? Computer. Therefore, inside of here, this is the computer object. So this dot name, computer dot name, is going to be John. So it's going to say John is great. Ta-da. Does that make things better or worse? We always need to look to what's to the left of the dot. Sometimes we'll have many things that are to the left of the dot. And actually, this is truly what is happening under the hood. Okay, if I brought this to the browser, this would work because Window does exist and computer exists on Window. It's a fact that it's been invisible to us this whole time. And this computer has already been declared. Cannot read property, a new method of undefined. Did I not declare computer? Oh, yeah, because it doesn't exist. Okay, right. Okay, that's fine. No problem. Okay, but sometimes we will get into a position where we have multiple dots, and you might wonder, well, what is the value of this when we have multiple dots? And it's always the object that's immediately to the left of the dot of the function. Okay, so if this is the function, this is the method that's being called or invoked, we only look at the dot beside it, and we look at the object immediately to the left of it. Okay. I'm going to throw another little wrench in things here. The value of this is different. So actually, this is pretty interesting. So this works, right? We can see that this works. John is great because the value of this, it looks at the thing to the left of the dot. Under the assumption this is fine. Okay, function expression, function declaration, no problem. Okay, actually, I'm kind of curious here. Where's the value of this? Here. Function declaration. Let's bring that over here. High class. Where is it getting? What? I'm very confused. Yeah, I did refresh the page. That's the confusing part. I refreshed the page. Watch this little thing. See, I'm refreshing it. And I paste it. Oh. Console paste high class. I don't even know where high class is coming from. Oh, Chrome. There's some sort of something going on there. I'm using Chrome, right? Yeah. So here, that's a little bit, that's interesting. Okay, anyways, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. I declared the name in the page. Yeah, but I didn't. This is all that I pasted, right? This is the only little piece of code. As it's some setting that it's carrying over the variables from one refresh to another, which is bad. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm going to take a look at that. Something that, so again, a little wrench into things. This works in the same way here, okay, being a function declaration or function expression. Where it doesn't work the same is arrow functions. It was declared earlier to window, however, window should refresh. When I refresh it, all that stuff should disappear. I'll have to take a look into it. Okay. Window is based on the state of that page at that time. If you refresh or move to another it's not window. Don't think of window as this entire window. You have to think of window as a page tab. This has its own window. This has its own window. This has its own window. Okay, it's based on the page tab and actually for the page. And technically, if I refresh the page, window and everything in it should also get refreshed as well. But anyways, going back to arrow, going back to the values of this is different on an arrow function. So the value of this on an arrow function is based on the value of this. So whatever the value whatever the value of this is outside, okay, is inherited in here. So what is the value of this out here? And if I just console log this, okay, it's going to be window. That means the value of this inside here will always be window. So it doesn't take whatever's to the left of this. It's always based on where it's defined. Okay. So which is really interesting. So if I were to switch my say hi to an arrow function instead of a regular function, and then I were to say computer.say hi, let's see how that works. Undefined says hi, because the value of this out here in the object, in the empty object, is window. Moral of the story. Typically, you don't want to use this inside of arrow functions unless you have a really, really good understanding of how this works inside of arrow functions, which means you probably are going to want to stick to function expressions inside of your objects when you're declaring your methods. Okay, that way you don't run into that problem. Okay, otherwise, arrow function, you get a problem. Okay, they inherit this. Okay, so the technical term is arrow functions inherit this from their context. Okay, arrow functions inherit this based on their context. Everything else, so function declarations, inherit this based on how they were invoked, not on their context. So this is always changing. The two rules are arrow functions based on their surrounding context. So whatever the value of this is outside of this scope. So it inherits from the parent scope, right? Just like variables, we have scope for variables. This inherits that, whatever the value of this is outside of this scope. Okay. And again, the value of this outside of this scope can definitely change, right? So that's really interesting. That's very interesting. So this would be a very interesting thing. Only when the parent is an object, it inherits it, right? No, all the time. Arrow functions, all the time. That's what they do. They inherit the value of this based on their scope, regardless of where this arrow function is. If I put this arrow function out here, it'll inherit it as well. Okay, that is how it always works. Arrow functions always inherit this based on their surrounding context all the time. Regular functions, they get the value of this based on the thing to the left of the dot. Very important distinction to make. Okay, so pretty much if you don't fully understand what's going on here and what I'm talking about, or you only have a mild grasp, use function expressions here, not arrow functions. That will save you a shit ton of debugging. Okay, you might get good at this and understanding this, in which case, go ahead, use whatever you want. Just make sure you know what you're doing. That's pretty much words to live by with programming. Use whatever you want, just make sure you know what you're doing. There's a million ways to do things. So it can be as complicated or as simple as you want. Just make sure you know what you're doing, because if it ever comes to changing things or debugging things, if you don't know what you're doing, you just shot yourself in the foot. And that's something that we're constantly trying to avoid. So. Any questions? So going forward, I expect you to use this to refer to the object itself for your declarations. So instead of saying computer inside, arrow functions came out in JavaScript in 2015. Instead of saying computer inside, I want you to start referring to it as this. Okay. Yeah. Arrow functions did not appear until ES6. Okay, ES6, also known as ES 2015 or ECMAScript 2015. Okay, so 2015 was when it came out. ES6, we're at like, I think ES7 or ES8 now. We're gonna look at a couple other pieces. We've kind of been looking at new pieces from ES6 here and there. It's pretty widely adopted now, though. We don't need to treat it as super new stuff. Yeah. So over every other class, I'll show you something new and mention that it's part of ES6. Okay. Okay. So let's take a look at the exercise for today. I'm going to figure out this window thing. So the exercise for today is very interesting. Very, very. We're starting to get a little bit more complicated. Okay. We're going to leave. Interaction with a DOM behind for a couple days, but we're coming back to it. Okay. We will not forget about it. We're going to leave it aside for a couple days because I want to focus on objects, but we're going to come back around to it probably in about a week. So don't forget about the DOM, okay? And we're going to be staying on DOM for the rest of the course pretty much. It's going to continually make an appearance. So I'm going to expect that you know how to interact with the DOM. So if you're not super comfortable with the DOM, it's worth practicing, okay? But for the next couple days, at least for the next week, this week, we won't be talking about the DOM. We'll just be talking about objects. So in addition to that, we got exercise 1, object review. So question 0. Okay, question 0. Question 0, create 4 car objects that have the following properties. So you're going to create 4 cars: color, brand, and price. 3 properties, and 1 method, drive. That should print out the car color, and that is where you'll put the color of the car, and you'll use this. Okay, you're going to use this, not the variable name. The car color, oops, room, where the car color is the specific color of the car object on which the method was invoked. Here are some additional requirements. To get some practice with the syntax, 2 car objects must be created using the object literal syntax, 2 with the object constructor. You will write a global method. So a global method means just a function not on an object. Okay, it's just accessible. It doesn't exist on an object, doesn't exist on the car object. It just exists out here in the wild, right? Like, this is accessible by everyone. This is considered global. Okay. Okay, this is global for us. Global scope. Anyone can access this. That's what you're going to write. You're going to write a global method, a global function that takes in 1 color string and 1 car object, a car and a color. Okay. And it's going to update the color of this car to the color provided, right? The cars will already have a color. So this is going to update the color of that car. Okay. Based on the color provided. Use the method you just wrote. So use this method, this function, on each car. So apply this to all 4 cars. So you start off with 4 cars, each of them have a color, and we're going to update the color of those cars. Then after we do that, I want you to use a for of loop, okay, we've already learned, to call the drive method of each car, to make each car drive. This is just syntax practice, okay? Just syntax practice. Question 1. This should look familiar. Create an object called dice. Ooh. The object should have the following properties and methods. Current total. Okay, you can tell what the difference is between a property and a method. A property has no parentheses. Okay, so properties have no parentheses when I'm describing them. Methods do. So you're going to create 3 objects here. You're going to create a dice object, and you're going to create 2 die objects. The dice object will contain the 2 die objects. Okay, that'll be interesting. So you're putting objects in an object. Totally reasonable. Again, if you went and looked at settings here, and we looked at the settings for VS Code, you would see that. Hey, look, there is an object inside of an object. Totally reasonable. The only difference is mine are more than just key value pairs. I'm trying to give you something that some conceptual object, right? A set of dice consists of 1, 2 dice. When we're talking about the set of dice together, those have some properties. Current total. The set of dice has a current total, which is the total of 1 dice plus the total of the other dice. Okay. It has a doubles count, right? Just like that exercise that we did, the assignment that we did. How many times did doubles show up on these 2 dice? Okay, and you can probably go back to your code and cherry pick some of that information. All dice, okay? All dice is an array containing 2 die objects. You must create these objects as well to be described below. So this is where you're going to store your dice, okay? Your objects. an array. All dice is an array containing 2 more objects, which is 2 of these. You're going to create 2 of these. And then roll a function which will roll dice 1 and die 2. Okay. The die object should have the following properties and methods. Sides, the total amount of sides on your die. Feel free to choose any amount. You choose. You don't have to prompt the user. Just pick whatever you want. 6, 10, 20. Doesn't matter. Ideally, not ideally, I mean, both sides could have the same. Both dies could have the same amount of sides, so you can roll 2 different dies. It's up to you. Oops. Stop. Rolls. An array that tracks all the numbers that were rolled. So each die is going to be tracking its own rolls. It's going to have all the rolls in it. So the first time we rolled a 6, the second time we rolled a 7. So if you had an array, it would say 6, 7. Then we roll again, 4, 6, 7, 4. So it's constantly updating every time someone rolls. We're tracking the rolls, the values. The value is the current value shown on the dice. Okay, it just returns the value that's shown on the dice. Remember, you don't always want to roll because rolling is the action of rolling, and rolling might return a value, but you'll see. Okay, roll is you will actually roll the dice. You're probably going to want to go back and cherry pick. A lot of these you're going to want to go back and cherry pick some of that information. And then average, a function that will return the calculated average of all the dice rolls. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you have all the dice rolls, you know how to calculate the average, which actually means we should probably, sorry, I'm missing one thing here. We also need a function on die called average. One is of the die rolls and one is of the dice rolls. Okay. Q2 and Q3. So Q2, if you want to challenge yourself further, you can use, if you were looking to challenge yourself further, write your own random number generator to use for the roll function. So I provide you one from past, but if you're like looking at this set of exercise and you're like, oh, this is going to be easy, I need more of a challenge, write your own. Okay, don't use mine, write your own. Go look up math.random and figure out how to write your own random number generator for rolling dice. Okay. Question 2, write a function that will accept a JavaScript object as a parameter. Your function should copy over all the properties and methods of the original object to a brand new object. So you're creating kind of like a clone function where you clone an object. Okay. So you're passing an object. It has 3 properties and 2 functions. I don't care, just make up whatever you want. And you want to clone that object. If you're doing any research and you come up on something called object.assign, you're not allowed to use it because it would make this question too easy. So, but I highly recommend you take a look at it because it's pretty awesome, and we will look at it in the future. Question 3 is a bonus question. Okay, so question 0, question 1, question 2. Question 0, just syntax. Question 2, a little bit more problem solving. Question 3 is, again, a little bit of problem solving, but and some syntax. Okay, and then, oops, put the wrong one. Question 3 is bonus. Q0, Q1, Q2. So I guess that's question 4. Q4 is bonus. Okay. There you have it. Any questions? And then we have some readings for tomorrow. Readings on today's stuff. Okay. This inside of an object. JavaScript object basics. So these two are covered stuff from today's lecture. So if you were looking for some reading or something in text about what I talked about, or something more definitive, something more more details, okay, check out these two readings. Otherwise, object-oriented JavaScript, this is what we're going to start covering tomorrow. So take a look at that, okay? So exercise 1 is for this afternoon. Zach will be online after lunch, so at 12:30. I think he's online right now, actually. He's not doing anything this morning, so he's online right now, so you can start bugging him. I'm also going to be online. I will not be online, actually, starting at 1:15, pretty much until 3:15. Unfortunately, I've got a couple of long meetings today that I have to deal with. But Zach will be online the whole time. You can still send me questions. My meetings might be very passive, and so I may not be actively participating in them, and I will be sitting at my computer, so I'll be able to answer them if I'm available. So feel free to shoot me questions. I won't be able to jump on any calls with you, though. Okay, if you need to jump on a call with someone to talk something through, ping Zach. Otherwise, feel free to send me questions as well. Okay. But I am good for the next 20 minutes as well, if you want to ask me any questions while we're just starting to get going on this. Again, take lunch whenever you feel like you need to. I would recommend maintaining your routine, okay? 11:30 to 12:30. That's what I would do. Other than that, any questions going forward? Nothing. All right. Enjoy. I think the dice one will be eye-opening. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's fine. I think the dice one, question 1, Q1, will be eye-opening for you. You might look at it and say, oh, that's going to be hard. I don't think it's going to be really hard. Okay, I think it'll be reasonable. The thing is, you already know how to do all these things. It's just a matter of taking what you've already done and reorganizing it and reassembling it. Okay, so go try. Oh, and then at the end, I say, using this new object, rewrite the main part of roll the dice question from our previous course. You can ignore prompting from the dice sides. This is in there, and tomorrow I'm going to do this. I recommend really doing that, like question 0 and question 1. Question 0 is really good for syntax. Question 1 is awesome. Okay, I really recommend you spend a lot of time on this. If it takes you a lot of time, take the time. You're going to get a lot out of this. Okay, so enjoy. I'll be around. Have a good afternoon. Feel free to chat, and take care. Stay safe. Talk to you later.